to these formulas. So these formulas look scary because they're big and they're long. They're actually not that bad. But what you have to be able to do with these formulas is recognize when you have something within the formula. They're on your formula sheet. So when you have 4 things with sine and cos on one side, it might trigger for you, hey, I should check one of these 4 to see if it matches up. So if I have cos 2x, cos 3x plus sine 2x, sine 3x, I look, when do I have cos, cos plus sine, sine? Oh, it's here in the last one. And it's equal to cos alpha minus beta. Yes?
Will be the absolute value of it? Or if you had like cos 2 and then cos 3 minus,
You know, it'll be exactly, there's no absolute values involved. So if you had, in example, if you had cos 2, cos 3 plus sine 2, sine 3, you would get cos negative 1.
but wouldn't that, because you can multiply them either way, you could say the cos of the second one starts first. And why would that change the answer?
Oh, you're saying you could have these ones flipped this way?
Yeah.
Well, because cos is a reflection over the x-axis, whatever is positive and negative is equal. So cos of 2 equals cos of negative 2. And that's why that works in this case. But that's not that important. What we do need to look at is how we're going to use these. Yes? No. The quiz tomorrow is only proofs. Okay? So the quiz tomorrow is only proofs. This stuff right now, we'll go to example 1 here. We'll look at some of the ways that you can use these formulas or work on these formulas. Question number 1. This is on page 637. Perfect. Now, when you read this question, I said to the class this morning, this is the perfect question right before Halloween because I think this is one of the scariest looking questions that you get during the year. First of all, it's long. It's got 2 angles in it, alpha and beta, and you have to figure out what sine alpha plus beta is. It looks complicated, but they're not that bad. Because it has 2 angles, I call this one a double triangle question. Because when you had our triangle questions, we've done triangle questions before where the main strategy is draw a triangle. This one starts off very similar. Given an angle in standard position in quadrant 3 and cos of alpha equals negative 3/5, doesn't that sound like our triangle question sounded? Where we know what quadrant it's in and we know something like cos is 3/5 so we can label some sides of our triangle. The reason this is going to be a double triangle question is because we're going to draw a triangle for alpha. And we have another angle, which is beta. We're going to draw a triangle for beta. So if we start with alpha, and it's not going to be always so easy to figure out what quadrant it's in. But what quadrant is this one in? 3. Because it tells you it's in quadrant 3. Sometimes it'll be trickier. If they said cos alpha was negative 3/5 and sine alpha was negative, it would also be in quadrant 3. But then you'd have to use your cast rule to figure it out. But there will always be enough information for you to figure out what quadrant it's in. You can draw your triangle back to the x-axis. You always draw it back to the x-axis so that you can label your reference angle. And since we know cos is 3/5, that means the adjacent and hypotenuse can be labeled. You recognize this triangle? What's the other side? 4. Nice. And for beta, so for our second triangle, what quadrant is beta in? Tells us that it's in quadrant 2. So we can draw an angle in quadrant 2 back to the nearest x-axis. So we can label our beta reference angle. Sine is 1/3. That means opposite over hypotenuse. What will the other side be?
2 vertical
Square root of 8.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
2 over 2.
Now, from these triangles, can you see that you now know sine of alpha is equal to 4 over 5? Will it be positive or negative? Negative. And we already knew from the question that cos of alpha was negative 3 over 5. And down here, you know that sine of beta, well, they told us that already was 1 over 3, but we also now know that cos of beta is root 8 over 3. Will it be positive or negative? Negative in quadrant 2. Now, the reason I wrote those down is because the question is asking us to find sine alpha plus beta. And that's one of our formulas. It's equal to sine alpha cos beta plus cos alpha sine beta. Because that's one of our formulas. And that formula is on your formula sheet. It's also up there on the wall. So I don't know how well you can see it from where you're sitting. But sine alpha plus beta is sine alpha cos beta plus cos alpha sine beta. And since we've drawn our triangles on the left, we have all the information we need. All we have to do right now in the next step is plug things in. So the next step I'm going to get you to do, because over my years of teaching, there's a very common mistake that happens in the next step. So what I want you to do is just do what you feel is right to write down your next step. I'm going to take a survey of how well we do. Okay? Usually it's about 50% of people make mistakes. That's how common it is, and 50% write it down correctly. And if I point out that mistake today, then those 50% that make the mistake don't make it on the test. Even if I show you the right step next, that 50% will still make the mistake on the test. So I need you to make that mistake now if you're going to make it, so I can show you what that mistake is. So write down what the next step is if you're what is right. First of all, the common mistake is you would like to plug in negative 4 over 5 for alpha. But you don't know alpha. What do you know? You know that all of sine alpha is equal to negative 4/5. So that means this whole sine alpha gets replaced with negative 4/5. The sine disappears. You don't know what alpha is. We never figure out what alpha is. We know what sine of alpha is. It's negative 4/5. We don't know what beta is, so you can't plug in negative 8 over root 3 for beta, but you know what all of cos beta is, so you plug in negative root 8 over 3 for all of cos beta. Plus, cos of alpha is negative 3 over 5. Sine of beta is 1 over 3. So the sine and the coses go away. They're not written anymore. And you can't plug it in for alpha because you don't know what the angle is. You just know what the ratio is. And now, to write this as a final answer, well, this is equal to 4 root 8 over 15 plus negative 3 over 15. We have a common denominator. We need to write our answer as a single fraction. So you'll get 4 root 8 minus 3 all over 15. Questions for practice on this one are 8 and 13.